Design, comparisons, display, camera, software, gaming, and finally benchmarks. This is my unboxing and extremely detailed review of the OPPO Reno5 Pro 5G. This is the global version, which literally just landed in India, and it has a starting price of 35,990 rupees. 8 gigs, 128 gigs, that is, works out to about 399 euros and 489 USD. Prices will be dropped in the description, as well as links to where you can purchase it if you're in India at the current point in time. These prices are actually cheaper than the China counterparts of the Reno 5 series devices. We get a 65-watt SuperVOOC 2.0 charger in the box, and without further ado, let's unwrap this guy. This is the Galactic Silver edition. You can also pick it up in Astral Blue or Starry Black. The Galactic Silver is only available in 12 gigs and 256 gigs of ROM. It looks absolutely stunning. It's literally a chameleon smartphone. It shifts colors with every different angle, hitting many different lights, changing the colors all around the phone. It looks absolutely stunning, and it uses individual pyramid microcrystals clustered together to get this effect. It's absolutely fantastic. This is not available on the Starry Black version. We have a 4,350 mAh battery, which is split in two, 65-watt SuperVOOC 2.0 wired charging. Of course, we have 5G and Wi-Fi 6 as well. We have Gorilla Glass 5 on the front and back with an aluminum frame. And because of the pyramid microcrystals, they are highly hydrophobic, meaning that water just slides right off it, so you won't really see many grease marks or fingerprint smudges, though you do have the option of slapping in the included silicone case, which still keeps that color shifting going great. Still looks fantastic with it on, though it just looks so much better with it off. We do have a power button with a green accent on the right hand side, designed for Reno at the top over there, also with color shifting design. On the left hand side, we have a split volume rocker, which I honestly love so much. Most phone companies need to start adopting this. I hate the single bar. And we have a dual SIM tray, but no expandable storage. USB Type-C 3.1 speeds, which is great. Unfortunately, only a mono speaker, though we do have Dolby Atmos. The camera bump looks really neat. It's not quite as big as other smartphones around, even though it is a quad camera setup, meaning that when it is on a flat surface, it does a fantastic job of having pretty much no screen wobble at all, especially compared to something with a massive module such as on the Note 20 Ultra. When you look at the design, it really does fit in quite nicely among these and stands out incredibly with that galactic silver color at the back. It looks absolutely stunning. Compared to all of them, it makes all these other phones look completely outdated. It is super thin and super light, but what about that front? Well, we are welcomed to a 3D curved 20:9 aspect ratio, 6.55 inch punch hole display. It is Full HD plus, it is AMOLED as well. We have HDR10 plus certified with Netflix HD and Amazon Prime HD, 1100 nits peak, 90 Hz refresh rate, 180 Hz touch sampling rate, and an incredibly high screen to body ratio. Comparing it to other curved designed phones, it's very subtle. It looks really neat. The colors really do pop, and honestly, it's just such a breath of fresh air to the eyes. When you compare it to an IPS display on the left hand side, you can clearly see AMOLED is a hell of a lot brighter and a lot more poppy when it comes to colors. And comparing it to flagships out there, such as the Mi 11, the Samsung, and even the OnePlus device, it is extremely bright. As you can see here, the colors pop. The white balance is just on par as even the more expensive devices that you can see around it. It has very, very minimal bezels and a tiny little punch hole camera at the top, which is left centered, not center centered. So I guess that kind of just comes down to preference. We do have a 90 Hz refresh rate panel here. You can throw it onto 60 if you'd like. Keeping it on 90, comparing it to the other 120 Hz phones here, honestly, I don't notice much of a difference in real life between 90 and 120 as I do with 60 and 90. So I think 90 is the sweet spot. I've been saying it for a while now. I'm going to stick to that. And moving on from that screen refresh rate, we can hide the notch in certain apps. We can display it in full screen with most apps like you've seen on other phones before. It says it's draining high performance when you up the brightness. A nice little inclusion over there. We have edge lighting, nice little features that just sway you to love ColorOS 11 even more. I did do a ColorOS 11 software review pretty recently, a couple months back. Make sure you check that out after this video. We do have dark mode settings, and you can change the different shades of dark mode, which is epic. It works in third-party apps, though not too many of them. Of course, we have an always-on display. As I mentioned in my ColorOS 11 review, I tested this out thoroughly, and it does a fantastic job. You can customize it just the way you'd like. It looks absolutely awesome when you put it together, knowing that when you lock your phone, looking down at it, you can be like, you know what, I created that. That's really cool, and it does a really awesome animation. You can even throw an analog clock in the middle, which is great. You can also customize our fingerprint sensor animation styles over here. I particularly like this one, as you see, and going into it, it's nice and snappy. We do have a physical one on the Xiaomi Mi 10i or Redmi Note 9 Pro 5G here in China. It is quicker than that one. When it comes to opticals, it seems a tad quicker, even compared to the Mi 11, and it is pretty much on par with the ultrasonic one underneath the display of the Note 20 Ultra, and a hell of a lot quicker than the OnePlus 8T, and OnePlus are known to have snappy fingerprint sensors. We do have 2D unsecure facial recognition system here using the selfie cam, and it is blitz quick, as you've come to know and expect from OPPO devices in the past year or two. It's pretty much smashing through every single device over here. Samsung was pretty on par, once again a lot quicker than the OnePlus 8T this time around, but that selfie cam can be used for more than just unlocking your phone. We have a 32 megapixel f2.4 selfie snapper. These selfie pictures do look all right, though this is a pretty overcast day, and I do notice a tad edge detection when it comes to portrait mode. This is TechNeck recording a 1080p 30 frames per second video on the OPPO Reno5 Pro 5G. Let me know what you guys think of the audio and video quality when recording with the selfie cam. Bear in mind that it is completely capped at 1080p and 30 FPS. And you can also shoot selfie video with the AI portrait mode feature, which I think looks pretty darn neat. And we also have some dual video modes here, so I guess if you have a friend you're giving a gift to and you want to capture both scenes, that's pretty awesome. Or if you just have a cool little figurine you want to show off with your face in the way, I guess you can do that too. We do have night mode when it comes to the selfie cam. Here is it off, here it is on, and it looks pretty good. It does wash away some of the detail. I prefer using the flash option, which is the best of both. At the back, we have a main 64 megapixel OmniVision, which I actually prefer over Sony and Samsung, by the way. f.17, you can pixel bin this down to 60 megapixel, 8 megapixel ultra wide, 2 megapixel macro, and 2 megapixel monochrome lens. That's pretty interesting. The 8 megapixel ultra wide is packed with detail. You do have a 108 megapixel mode, by the way, so just because this isn't a 108 megapixel phone, you can still take one of the snaps. 64 looked great. 16 megapixel bin looks absolutely fantastic with AI enabled. We have digital zoom here, 2, 5, 10, and 20. Honestly, they all look a lot more usable than previous phones I've been reviewing on my channel with digital zoom, and you can go up to 20x. Most budget phones only go up to 10x. 16 megapixel main here, jumping through to that 2 megapixel macro. It really does pop. You don't need 5 megapixels for this. 16 megapixel main, jumping into AI highlight portrait mode, which is something new for OPPO over here. It looks great. We also have neon portrait, which pops the colors a little bit more, and AI color portrait, which does an incredible job at justifying the colors from the background, which is monochrome. We also have the monochrome portrait when it comes to video recording. AI color portrait, though capped at 720p 30 fps, still does a great job even when I'm moving the subject around. We have 1080p 30 fps AI highlighted portrait. This brightens things up, gives it a nice little surreal look. Looks fantastic. We do have 4K 30 frames per second, no 60 FPS option over here. We are using a Dimensity 1000 Plus chipset. Not quite sure if that has anything to do with it, though. We do have 1080p at 60 FPS, nice and smooth over here, looking super clear if you ask me. We have 1080p at 30 FPS in AI highlight mode, like I showed you with that picture earlier. You can record in this, though it's capped at 30 FPS, and 1080p, it just pops the colors even more. We do have 1080p at 30 FPS ultra wide, though this is the max. You can't do 4K and you can't do 60 FPS, gets things nice and wide with 119 degrees field of view. That is ultra steady off over here. Now 1080p 55 frames per second. For some reason it drops to that ultra steady on. It's a lot more stable, but it does dip in quality quite a bit. Ultra steady pro is kind of a good balance between the two, I guess, but still quality is dipping. It's still super steady. We do have night mode over here. It's off at the current moment. Now it is on, brightens things up. Once again, you lose a tad of detail. And we have for the first time AI highlight video, which highlights, literally brightens up the shot. It does a great job, but once again, it drops the detail, but it really does a surprisingly great job at brightening up this video recording. We also have SoLoop, a video editor made by OPPO, which you can jump into straight from the gallery, and it does a pretty great job. Have a look at my final production. When it comes to software, the OPPO Reno5 Pro 5G is running ColorOS 11.1 skinned over Android 11, and it's absolutely phenomenal. As I mentioned earlier, I did do a full review on ColorOS 11, so make sure you check that out after this video. It has everything that you could ever want in a smartphone, and it even has Google packed right into the settings, and Google Discover on the left, Google Assistant, everything Google, and extra personalizations. It's pretty much a stock Android experience and then some. It does a great job when it comes to static and dynamic wallpapers. You can customize your icons any way you'd like, pretty much. You can even change the color schemes when it comes to your settings, as well as your pull down top notification pad over there. And we can do split screen with 3 fingers swiping up, play a game, and Google something at the same time, which is fantastic. We've seen this on many phones before. We also have floating and mini windows over here, which work as you would expect. It does a great job, though you can only keep one open at a time. And we do have something called System Cloner. So getting to some of my favorite parts of ColorOS over here as well, not getting into too much detail on it, but System Cloner, you can use a different password to jump into a different system and then use your regular password to jump back into your normal system. So if you want to hand your phone over to a friend, jumping to that system, it will be better for them to not see your private items. You can also create your own wallpaper. It doesn't really create it though. You can kind of just choose a bunch of different ones with the same color scheme. You can take screenshots, scrolling screenshots, partial screenshots. My favorite thing to do, 3 fingers down, take a screenshot, hit translate using Google Lens, and there we go. This is the collaboration between Google and OPPO. This is not on all Google-centric devices. It does a great job. You can even use the pull-out sidebar on the right-hand side to translate there, which is even quicker. It really does a great job if you do live abroad. And honestly, these haptics are on a flagship level. And of course, we do have Dolby Atmos, though we're lacking dual stereo speakers. Nevertheless, let's give them a listen. We are kitted out with game space on the phone, where you can enable competition mode and boost your games even quicker. Of course, we have a MediaTek Dimensity 1000 Plus chipset in the smartphone. It is super fast and fluid. We'll get to some benchmarks later. We're going to test out FPS real soon. We do have game space overlay over here. It does a pretty great job. When it comes to PUBG Mobile, on most devices at the current moment, you can do smooth and 90 frames per second. That option is not available yet on the Reno5 Pro over here, but I'm pretty sure we'll get it soon. We are getting a pretty stable 60 FPS on smooth graphics settings, that is. Though if you go above smooth graphics settings, there is no extreme FPS option. So you're going to be sitting at 40, not because the device can't handle it, but just because the app doesn't support the device, and vice versa quite yet. Dead Trigger 2 has an unlimited frames per second cap, and the Reno5 Pro 5G is hitting a solid 90 FPS. Most of the time actually hitting 91, which is really great. Feels super smooth and fluid and looks fantastic as well. Real Racing 3 also has no frames per second cap, but unfortunately it's hitting 60 or 61 FPS. Hopefully the devs over at the team of EA, which produce Real Racing, will fix this on the Reno5 Pro in the near future. Moving on to benchmarks here with that MediaTek Dimensity 1000 Plus chip. I do have 12 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of ROM, 4350 mAh battery. We're going to compare the battery temp and CPU temp at the start of the test to the end of the test, right after we speed through this, as well as the score, of course. The battery drained at a rate of 26.1 mAh per minute, which is actually pretty average. We added on the battery 11.4 degrees in Celsius and CPU 22 degrees in Celsius. Final score here, the OPPO Reno5 Pro 5G scored 518,079 points, putting it ahead of its biggest rivals. It is definitely a step ahead of the Snapdragon 855 Plus, 855, 765G, which is indeed paired in the predecessor of the Reno5, the Reno4 Pro 5G. It is, however, slightly below the Snapdragon 865 processed phones, but those phones usually cost a hell of a lot more than this one does. Next benchmark is Geekbench 5.2.5. We got a single core score of 800 and a multi-core score of 2407. This is slightly below its competitors, but still a step ahead of the 855 Plus, 855, and 765G. So it's definitely a worthy upgrade when it comes to the CPU department. Now, what about the GPU? Well, we're going going to be running through our third benchmark now, which is 3D Mark Wildlife. And we got an overall score of 3928 and an average frames per second count of 23.5. Even better than the Snapdragon 865 powered smartphones. The OPPO Reno5 Pro 5G really is a color shifting stunner. It's pretty much like a chameleon of its own on the back. It looks fantastic in so many different lighting conditions. I definitely have to show you more of this. But going into that screen, we have a wonderful 6.55 inch AMOLED display with a 90 Hz refresh rate, and it is super buttery smooth. Don't get me wrong, 120 is higher, but honestly, you can't notice much of a difference. And the 90 Hz does translate into high frames per second gaming. We have some other little features kitted within ColorOS 11, which does a great job in terms of translating or just bouncing around your phone, especially when it comes to personalizations, which is absolutely fantastic. I wish more Android phones would adopt this. But of course, it is not alone. We do have slightly cheaper phones and slightly more expensive phones, though they don't quite have the class that the Reno5 Pro 5G has, and of course it is a lot cheaper than many flagships out there, but with top tier performance, making it a really easy recommendation from me to you.